The woman standing in the rain outside the elementary school wasn't supposed to be there. That was the first thing Tobias Greer noticed, not the flat tire on her sedan, not the way she was crouching beside the rear wheel with her good blazer getting soaked through, not even the fact that it was a Tuesday afternoon in November and the parking lot had mostly emptied out. What he noticed was that she looked exactly like someone he had spent 15 years trying to forget. He sat with his hands on the steering wheel for a long moment. His daughter Lily was in the back seat, still buckling herself in, chattering about something that happened at recess. He heard about half of it. The other half of his attention was on the woman in the rain, and on the particular way she tucked her chin when she was frustrated. A small private gesture he would have recognized anywhere, in any parking lot, in any city in the world. He told himself he wasn't sure. He told himself it had been too long, that people change, that you can convince yourself you see someone in a stranger's face when you want to badly enough. Then she looked up, and he stopped telling himself anything at all. Her name was Ingrid Solano, or it had been, once. He didn't know what she went by now. Tobias got out of the truck. He had grown up in Crestfield, Ohio, the kind of town where the high school football scores still made the front page of the local paper, and everybody knew whose truck was parked outside whose house. His father had run a small electrical contracting business, and Tobias had grown up handing him tools, learning the difference between a three-way switch and a four-way, learning how to read a blueprint before he could read a novel well. He was not a complicated man. He worked hard. He loved his daughter. He kept a tidy house on the east side of Hargrove, Indiana, where he had relocated after his divorce, and he coached youth baseball on Saturday mornings in the spring. His life was clean and ordered in a way that had taken him years to build, and he was proud of it in a quiet way he never talked about out loud. He had not talked about Ingrid in years, not to his sister, not to his ex-wife, not to the handful of friends who knew bits and pieces of who he'd been in his 20s. There was nothing dramatic to say in the end. They had met in Columbus when he was 24, and she was 22. They had dated at 2 years. They had talked about a future with the easy confidence of people who don't yet know how fast things can unravel. And then she had ended it. Not badly, not with a scene, not with another person involved. She had just sat across from him at a kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold between her hands and told him she needed something different, that she couldn't explain it better than that she was sorry. He had believed the sorry. He still believed it. That had always been the thing that made it harder. Somehow, there was no villain in the story. Just two people who had wanted different things at an age when neither of them had been certain enough to fight for what they had. He had thought about her the way you think about a place you used to live. Not with longing, exactly. More with that particular ache of knowing you can't go back and having made your peace with it, mostly. "Do you need help?" he said. She looked up from the tire. The rain had flattened her dark hair against her forehead, and her blazer was going to need dry cleaning. She had a lug wrench in her hand that she clearly didn't know how to use. For a second, just one, she didn't recognize him. He watched the moment she did. Her expression shifted in a way he couldn't fully name, something that moved through surprise and landed somewhere more complicated. "Tobias," she said. Not a question. Just his name, in her voice, the way she used to say it when she was thinking something through. "Hey, Ingrid," he said. Lily appeared at his elbow. She was 8, and she had his patience and her mother's directness, and she looked at the flat tire with the frank assessment of a child who had watched her father fix things her whole life. "Dad can change that," she said. "He changed ours in like 10 minutes once." Tobias almost laughed. "You don't have to stand in the rain," he said to Ingrid. "I've got a jack in the truck." She looked at him for a moment longer than was comfortable. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. He got the jack. She stood under the small overhang of the school entrance while he worked. Lily stayed with him, handing him things with the solemn efficiency of a surgical assistant, asking questions about torque that he answered honestly. The rain let up a little after the first few minutes, falling softer, more like mist than anything else. He didn't try to make conversation while he worked. There was something almost restful about having a task in front of him. A concrete problem with a concrete solution. He focused on the wheel, on the lugs, on the spare that was in good condition, thankfully, not one of those miniature emergency tires that made you drive 40 miles an hour all the way to the nearest shop. When it was done, he stood up and wiped his hands on an old rag from the truck bed. Good as new, Lily announced. Ingrid came over from the overhang. She looked at the tire, then at Tobias, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the silence had weight to it. Not uncomfortable exactly, but full of something neither of them was ready to name. "Thank you," she said. "Seriously. I was about to call a tow truck. This saved you 2 hours, probably," he said. She smiled. It was a little tentative, a little searching, the way people smile when they're not sure what register to be in. "Your daughter is great," she said. "She's his," he agreed. Lily had gone back to the truck and was examining something on her sneaker with intense concentration, having apparently decided that her work here was done. Tobias envied her the simplicity of that. "Are you picking someone up here?" Ingrid asked, nodding toward the school. "Lily goes here. 3rd grade. He paused. "You?" "My nephew. My sister lives nearby. I watch him on Tuesdays." She looked down for a moment. "I moved back to the area about a year ago. Hargrove." He absorbed that. "I've been here 6 years," he said. She closed her eyes briefly. "Okay," she said quietly. Small world," he agreed. They stood there for another moment in the soft rain. He should have said goodbye. He knew he should have said goodbye, gotten back in his truck, driven home, made Lily the macaroni she'd been requesting since Monday, and left the whole afternoon in the category of strange coincidences that you mention once and then let go. He was a practical man. He believed in clean lines. Instead, he said, "There's a diner on Mercer Street. Good coffee. If you're not in a rush." She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not in a rush," she said. The diner was called Patty's, and it had been there since 1987 based on the sign above the door that no one had updated. The booths were red vinyl, the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs, and there was a laminated card on every table advertising a slice of cherry pie that Tobias had eaten approximately 40 times in 6 years and never gotten tired of. He ordered the pie. Ingrid wrapped both hands around her coffee mug the way she used to, and the familiarity of that gesture did something small and stubborn to his composure. They talked carefully, the way people do when there's a history between them that hasn't been addressed. Her nephew, whose name was Cody, was 7 and obsessed with dinosaurs. She was working as a school counselor now. She'd gotten her master's degree a few years after they'd split, moved around a bit, landed back in Indiana partly by accident and partly because her sister had needed help. She did not mention a husband or a partner, and he did not ask. He told her about Lily. About the divorce, which had happened when Lily was 3, civil and sad in the way divorces are when 2 decent people have simply run out of road together. About the electrical business he'd started on his own 5 years ago. Small but steady. About the house, which he'd bought as a project and was still slowly improving room by room. She listened the way he remembered her listening, with full attention, like what you were saying actually mattered. It had always been one of the things he'd valued most about her. He hadn't let himself think about it in years. "You seem good," she said at some point. "Really good. I am," he said. And then, because it was true and because he thought she deserved the honest version, it took a while. She looked down at her coffee. "I know I hurt you," she said. "I've thought about that a lot, actually, more than you'd probably expect." He didn't say anything. He let her continue. "I wasn't ready for what we had," she said. "I kept telling myself I needed space to figure out who I was before I could be good for anyone else. And there was truth in that. But I also think I was just scared, and I called it something more dignified. She looked up. I'm not asking for anything from telling you that. I've wanted to say it for a long time. The diner was quiet around them. Someone at the counter was talking to Patty, or whoever was working, about a high school basketball game. The coffee was exactly as good as it always was. Tobias turned his mug slowly in his hands. I was angry for a long time, he said. Not at you exactly. More at the situation. At not understanding it. That's fair. And then I had Lily, and I was angry less, because she took up all the space that anger used to live in. He paused. I don't know if I'd change anything, if I'm honest. I ended up where I'm supposed to be. I believe that. Ingrid watched him. Do you? She asked softly. I do, he said. But that doesn't mean there wasn't something real between us. It just means life moved on whether we were ready or not. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and the early evening light was coming through the diner windows at a low angle, catching the dust in the air and turning it golden. I'm not the same person I was, she said. Neither am I, he said. There was a silence that followed that exchange, a different kind of silence than the careful ones from earlier, deeper and less guarded. Lily was coloring something on a kid's menu she'd gotten from the server, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. And Tobias watched her for a moment with that particular gratitude he felt. Sometimes when he looked at her and remembered what his life had felt like before she existed. She looks like you, Ingrid said. She acts like me too, unfortunately for her. Ingrid smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I think that's fortunate for her, actually. He wasn't sure what to do with that. He'd spent so many years building something solid and self-contained that the idea of a door opening felt both welcome and genuinely frightening in a way he hadn't anticipated. He was 41 years old. He was not a man who frightened easily. He could wire a circuit panel in the dark from memory, could talk a nervous homeowner through a problem over the phone, with the patience of someone who had explained things 1,000 times and still believed they were worth explaining. But sitting across from Ingrid Solano in a red vinyl booth in a diner on Mercer Street, he felt like a person who was standing at the edge of something without being able to see the bottom. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong. He thought about Lily, who had learned early what it meant when adults she cared about came and went. He thought about the years he'd spent getting himself to a place that felt stable and whole, and whether it was wisdom or fear that made him want to protect it so carefully. He thought about the way Ingrid had looked at him in the parking lot when she'd realized who he was. Not like someone who wanted something from him, more like someone who had been carrying a weight for a long time and had just put it down for a second without meaning to. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes, she said. What do you want? Out of this, running into each other, this conversation, what do you want to happen? She didn't look away. He had always respected that about her. She didn't flinch from direct questions, even when the answer was hard. I don't know exactly, she said. I think I would like to not be strangers anymore. I think I've been a stranger to you in my head for so long that it's become its own kind of weight. She paused. I'm not asking you to trust me. I haven't earned that. I'm just saying that seeing you today, I don't want to get back in my car and have that be it. He was quiet for a moment. Lily, he said. His daughter looked up from her coloring. What do you think about going to the park this Saturday? You and me and maybe a friend of mine. Lily considered this with the gravity of someone weighing an important decision. Will there be swings? There will be swings, he confirmed. She went back to her coloring. Okay, she said, but I call the high one. Tobias looked at Ingrid. She was looking back at him, and whatever had been in her expression before, the tentativeness, the careful measuring, had given way to something quieter and more honest. Not happiness exactly, more like the particular feeling of a thing being set right that had been wrong for a long time. Saturday, she said. Saturday, he agreed. He drove home the long way, because Lily liked to see the lights along the river when it was getting dark. She fell asleep in the back seat before they reached the bridge. Her coloring project rolled up in her hand. He drove in the quiet and let himself think, which he usually kept tightly controlled, but allowed himself this one time. He didn't know what would come of it. He was realistic enough to know that the gap between a conversation in a diner and anything more substantial was wide, and full of the specific difficulties of real life. 2 schedules, 1 small child, 15 years of absence, and whatever internal landscapes had shifted in both of them in ways they hadn't fully mapped. He was not the kind of man who confused a good hour for a guaranteed future, but he also knew this. He had stopped to help because it was the right thing to do, and something had happened in that parking lot that he didn't want to put in a box and seal away. Not because he was lonely. He had made his peace with solitude. It was different from loneliness, and he knew the difference. But because there was something in him that had always known the ending with Ingrid had been incomplete. Not in a romantic movie way, not in a way he'd ever expected to revisit, just incomplete the way some sentences are. Trailing off before the period. Maybe it would stay that way. Maybe Saturday would be awkward and quiet, and they would both realize that what they'd found in each other at 22 was too far back to build from. That was possible. He allowed for it. But he had not been a man who shied from things simply because they might not work out. He had built a business from nothing, raised a child mostly on his own, renovated a house room by patient room. He understood that nothing worthwhile came without the risk of it not going the way you'd hoped. And he was old enough now to know the difference between a risk worth taking and one that wasn't. The lights along the river were orange and gold, reflected in broken lines across the water. Lily murmured something in her sleep and resettled her head against the window. He turned down the radio so as not to wake her. There is something worth saying here. Before we leave Tobias and Lily to their quiet drive home, it would be easy to look at this story and call it luck. The right parking lot, the right Tuesday, the rain at just the right moment. And luck was part of it. No honest person would deny that. But luck only becomes anything when someone decides to get out of the truck. Tobias could have stayed. He almost did. He sat with his hands on that wheel for long enough that another version of him, a more cautious one, a more protected one, would have pulled out of that parking lot and let the moment close behind him. A lot of us do that. We tell ourselves we're being wise. Sometimes we are. But sometimes we're just afraid of being seen again by someone who already knows our face. He got out of the truck. Whatever comes next, the park, the swings, the long and imperfect work of 2 people learning each other again across a gap of years. Whatever comes next begins with that. With the choice to stop, to offer the jack. To say the name out loud and let it land in the air between them where it had been waiting all along. That, in the end, is enough to start with.